The deaths of a family of 8 found inside a burning home in West Michigan Friday have been ruled a murder-suicide. Firefighters were called to that fire at a home on Riverside Trail in Grand Haven Township when they found the bodies of 2 adults and 6 children. The Ottawa County Sheriff's Office says 47-year-old Christopher Carroll Glitz shot his wife Amanda and their 6 kids, ranging in age from 5 to 15, before turning the gun on himself.
Saw them getting on the bus almost every day. When I went to work, they were always getting on the bus. I did hear some neighbors say that we wish we would go out and talk more as a neighborhood and kind of get together more, because this was something that you just don't think is going to happen.
Deputies say the fire was intentionally set after the killings. The fire's cause remains under investigation, and authorities say there are no other suspects. What has to be broken inside a man's head before he picks up a gun registered in his own name, walks through his own house, and shoots his wife and all 6 of his children? Not a stranger, not a break-in, the man whose name was on the mortgage. When it is finished, he does not run, does not call anyone, does not leave. He sets fires in room after room and stays in the house while it burns. 15, 12, 11, 11, 11. 5. Those are not case numbers. Those are the ages of the 6 children who died on Riverside Trail. 4 boys, 2 girls. 2 of them adopted from 10,000 miles away by a mother who had just taken them back to China to see where they were born. She posted about the trip 8 days before she died. She said she was proud of them. Their father was a national vice president at the American Heart Association. He ran sales and marketing for the division that teaches people how to save a life. He had never been arrested. In all the years that family lived in that house, not one police call. Nothing on paper. Nothing anyone reported. At 8:30 that morning, firefighters were already on that street. Neighbors had called about the smell of smoke. Crews drove the block, found nothing, and left. They came back 3 hours later. 8 people were already dead while the trucks idled 100 yards away. Every channel covering this case has handed you a motive by now. It is neat, it is satisfying, and almost none of them will tell you where they got it. Not from the sheriff, not from the medical examiner, from a Reddit thread, while the dead woman's own family publicly begged people to stop repeating it. The sheriff has never stated a motive. Not once. What he said, 4 days in, was that this may never be understood, and in the days after the fire, detectives carried something out of that house. They still have not said what it was. Riverwood is a wooded subdivision in Grand Haven Township, Michigan, a few minutes inland from Lake Michigan. 2-story homes on large lots, set back from the road, with enough tree cover that you can stand in one driveway and not clearly see the next. At 8:30 on Friday, July 24, 2026, people on Riverside Trail started calling about the smell of smoke. In a neighborhood like that in July, the smell means someone is burning brush. Firefighters and Ottawa County deputies came out regardless. They worked the roads around 148th Avenue and Mercury Drive, looking for a column, a haze, an open flame. There was nothing to find. Smell carries. A fire burning behind closed windows, concentrated below grade in a basement, will push odor across a subdivision for hours before it produces anything visible from the street. Crews were searching for smoke. The smoke had not surfaced yet. They cleared the scene at some point before 10. The second round of calls came just before 11:45. Nobody was describing a smell this time. White smoke was coming out of a house, and callers could name which one. Crews returned to the 14900 block and forced entry. They found 8 people inside, 2 adults, 6 children, all one family, all living at that address. None of them had made it out of a fire that had been burning while trucks worked the street outside. That is how it was written up on day 1. A house fire. A family that did not escape. That version of events survived 4 days. What ended it was not the fire scene. It was a set of autopsy findings from Corewell Health Blodgett, and by the time investigators read them, they were no longer looking at 8 fire deaths. They were looking at 8 gunshot wounds and a fire that someone had set on top of them. The fire was Friday, July 24. The ruling came Monday, July 27th. 72 hours would put it Sunday. Small factual tightening. 8 gunshot wounds changes what kind of case this is. A fatal house fire is an origin and cause question. It belongs to fire investigators. A house where every occupant has been shot belongs to detectives. And by Monday, the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office was running a homicide investigation with a fire burning on top of it. The work split into 2 tracks. Detectives took the deaths. Michigan State Police arson investigators took the fire, working cause and origin as a separate specialist question that is still open today. What that second track established early is the detail the case turns on. The fire had not started in one place and spread. It had been set in numerous places throughout the interior of the residence, with the heaviest damage concentrated in the basement. That finding eliminates accident on its own. A faulty appliance produces 1 seed of fire. Bad wiring produces 1 seed of fire. Flame moves outward from where it begins, along paths investigators can trace backward. Several separate points of origin, with unburned space between them, is not a mechanism failing. It is a route. Somebody walked it. And the sequence ran one direction only. Everyone in that house was dead before anything was lit, so the fire was never an escape. It was what came after. Then there is the absence, which is its own kind of evidence. No forced entry, no signs of struggle anywhere in the home, all 6 children in their bedrooms. Nothing disturbed, nothing overturned, nothing suggesting a single person in that house had a reason to run. Whoever moved through those rooms was not someone anyone inside was afraid of. The weapon settled it. Investigators traced it to a registration in the name of a man who slept in that house every night. At that point, they had a suspect, a scene, and a sequence. What they did not have was a single prior police call to the address. Not one. In all the years the family lived there. That absence is where this case gets difficult, and it is where nearly every version of this story you have seen stops doing the work. What follows is the part built on the record instead of the rumor. Subscribe before we go further. Ottawa County named him on Monday, July 27th. Christopher Karolkovich, 47. He had shot his wife Amanda, 39, and their 6 children, set the fires, and then died by suicide. 7 homicides and 1 suicide inside one address. Capt. Jake Sparks delivered it at a press conference and read a statement from Sheriff Eric DeBoer that did not offer a reason. DeBoer called it an unspeakable tragedy they may never completely understand. 4 days into an investigation, sheriffs do not usually concede that. They say the investigation is ongoing. They say they are pursuing all leads. DeBoer said something closer to the truth of what his detectives were looking at, which was a case with no architecture in it. Domestic homicide investigations are built backward through escalation. There is almost always a trail, a hang-up call 2 years earlier, a neighbor who reported shouting, a charge filed and dropped, a protective order nobody enforced. That record is how investigators establish pattern, and pattern is how they get to intent. The Karolkovich file was empty. No prior calls to the address, no documented incidents, no welfare checks, no orders of any kind. Christopher had no criminal history anywhere in the state. There was nothing to follow backward. So detectives went to the only places left: devices, financials, employment records, correspondence. The contents of the house itself, room by room, and by the following Tuesday, they were working through documents they had removed from the home. They have never said what those documents are, but something else surfaced first, and it did not come from the sheriff's office at all. It came from a national organization in Dallas, issuing a written statement to reporters asking questions about one of its former executives. Inside that statement was a single sentence about employment dates. It confirmed that in the weeks before July 24th, Christopher Karolkovich's life had changed in one significant way. Amanda's parents did not know it had happened, neither did her sister, neither did anyone else in that family. They found out the same way the rest of the country did. The American Heart Association hired Christopher Karolkovich in September 2023. By 2026, he was a national vice president, running sales and marketing for the division that produces CPR and first aid training. He had no involvement with the organization's Michigan operations and never worked out of its Michigan offices. He reported to national headquarters and he worked from his house. Earlier in July 2026, his employment ended. That phrasing belongs to Suzanne Grant, who handles media relations for the organization. It confirms the hire date, the title, the division, and the separation. It does not say whether he resigned or was removed, and the Heart Association has declined to clarify since. The killings came on July 24th. The separation and the murders fell inside the same 4 weeks. Now consider what a remote job does to a secret. Losing work is almost impossible to conceal from a household because concealment collapses on contact with routine. The commute stops. The badge stops working. Colleagues call the landline. Somebody notices the car in the driveway at 11 in the morning. None of those failure points exist when the office is a room in the house. The door closes at the same hour. The laptop opens. From the kitchen, from the hallway, from the other side of that door, the day looks identical to every day before it. A man in that position can lose a national vice presidency and keep performing its shape indoors, indefinitely, in front of 6 children and a wife. We know he did, because of who found out and when. Emily Jones is Mandy's cousin and has spoken for the family since the killings. She confirmed the family had no idea he was out of a job. They learned it in the aftermath, from news reports, alongside everyone else in the country. That is the confirmed fact in this case that nobody has reckoned with properly. Not the job loss, the silence around it. And it needs to be said clearly, because this is where other coverage stops being careful. No investigator has linked the separation to the killings. The sheriff's office has not identified a motive of any kind. People lose executive jobs constantly and hide it out of shame, and effectively, none of them do anything resembling this. A sequence is not a cause. What the record supports is narrower and worse. For the final weeks of that family's life, the man at the center of it was maintaining a performance inside the same walls, every day, for an audience that had no idea a performance was happening. Whatever else was happening in that house, he was the only one who knew the ground had already gone. And for 9 days in the middle of it, he was in there alone. His wife was 10,000 miles away, and she was posting every day. Amanda Karolkovich went by Mandy, and she documented her own life thoroughly enough that most of it survives her. She and Christopher met at a beverage company in 2008, started dating that summer, and married in August 2009. Their first son arrived in April 2011. She wrote at the time that it was the best day of her life so far, on a parenting blog she kept through those years. 2 more boys followed inside 4 years. She left banking for part-time work at a local insurance agency, then stopped working outside the home altogether. The couple later adopted 2 girls from China. By 2026, the house held 6 children, 4 boys, 15, 12, 11, and 5. 2 girls, both 11. Mandy had gone back to work by then, substitute teaching for Grand Haven area public schools out of Peach Plains Elementary. In January, the district put up a public post naming her a premier substitute, describing a woman who went above and beyond for students who were having a hard day and who responded with empathy, patience, and care. School districts do not write posts about substitute teachers. Somebody there thought she was worth the exception. Then there is July, which she published almost in full. She took her 2 adopted daughters to China. Not a vacation, a return, to the country both girls came from. On July 16th, she posted from the trip in traditional Han Fu, hair and makeup done, calling it the coolest experience she had shared with her daughters. She wrote that she was so proud of their Chinese heritage. On July 17th, she posted again, the 3 of them packing to fly back to Michigan. She wrote that they were so ready to be home. 7 days later, she was dead, and so were all 6 of her children, in the house she had been that eager to get back to. There is one more thing in the record, and it does not sit alongside any of this comfortably. Roughly 2 years before that trip, an account matching the details of her marriage, her children, her occupation, and her address had been posting about that marriage on a public forum, at length, under a name none of her family recognized. What that account said has now been repeated across channels, pulling hundreds of thousands of views, almost always with no source attached. Subscribe now if you want it laid out straight, because this is the part everyone skipped. On July 27th, the Detroit News reported it had found a Reddit account it believed belonged to Amanda Karalkovich. The username was MandyK1179. Dozens of posts, written roughly 2 years earlier. The paper reported it independently confirmed the account by cross-matching what was inside the posts against what was known about the family. The marriage dates, the ages, the children, the occupations, the residence. The posts describe a marriage under strain. They describe accusations of infidelity. In one passage, the writer describes her husband after a counseling session, unable to sleep, angry at himself, reacting to a question from the counselor about whether he had heard her. Within hours, it was on every platform covering the case. Follow this carefully, because everything the public currently believes about these killings rests on it. Confirming who wrote something is not the same as confirming that what they wrote is true. A newspaper matching biographical details establishes authorship to a reasonable standard. It establishes nothing about accuracy. Posts written 2 years earlier are one person's account of her own marriage at that. That is evidence of what she believed and what she was living through. It is not a finding about what her husband did, and it says nothing whatsoever about July 2026. The family will not go even that far. Emily Jones stated directly that they have no way to confirm Mandy wrote any of it. Molly Cessna, Mandy's sister, posted publicly asking people to stop circulating the material while the investigation was open, saying that anyone with real respect for her sister's family would wait until the investigation allowed it. Cessna wrote something else in those days, that everything was blurry, that she needed people to keep praying while the family tried to piece it together, and that tragic doesn't even touch it. Then there is the position nobody quotes, because it consists of silence. The Ottawa County Sheriff's Office has never referenced that account. Not at the press conference, not in any written release. Not once. Investigators have not confirmed it, cited it, or used it to explain anything. As of today, no law enforcement agency has stated a motive in this case in any form. That is the actual record. A newspaper says it verified an account. The family says it cannot. Police have said nothing. And an entire genre has spent a week treating the combination as a settled explanation for why 8 people are dead. Crisis specialists working in that part of Michigan issued their own warning as the theories spread, telling the public not to assume they understood this family from the outside. That warning runs both directions. It applies to anyone certain the marriage was fine. It applies just as hard to anyone certain a message board explains a mass killing. Here is what should end the argument. Detectives are not reading Reddit. They have something none of the people theorizing online have seen, and none of them will see for months. They took it out of the house. Ottawa County investigators removed documents from the home on Riverside Trail, and by the following Tuesday, detectives were working through them. Nobody has said what those documents are, but the categories are standard, because the problem is standard. When the only suspect is dead, there is no interview, no interrogation, no plea. The case becomes reconstruction. Investigators rebuild the last weeks of a man's life out of whatever paper he left in the building. That means financial position, debt, mortgage status, account balances, whether that household was solvent in July. It means the terms of the separation from the Heart Association, which is precisely the question the organization has refused to answer publicly. It means insurance, correspondence, anything carrying a date inside the final month. Paper has timestamps. A message board does not. If an explanation for July 24 exists in a form that can be established rather than assumed, it is in that material, and it is not online. The arson track is still open alongside it. Michigan State Police have not released cause and origin. Sparks has been direct about what the sheriff's office wants from the public. Come forward with factual knowledge of the family. Do not send theories. Steve and Becky Lawwill made their own request when they released the statement about their daughter. They asked the media to give the family space in the weeks and months ahead, and to respect the privacy of everyone who loved Mandy and the children. both requests have been largely ignored. And there is a reason this case has produced so much noise, which is that it will never produce the thing this genre normally ends on. There will be no arrest, no arraignment, no defense theory, no cross-examination, no verdict, no sentencing, no victim impact statement read into a record by a mother's parents while the man responsible sits 10 feet away and has to listen. Every one of those procedures exists to force the truth into the open under oath. He made certain none of them would ever happen. The arson findings are still out. So is the document review. When either lands, the follow-up goes here. Grand Haven started responding before anyone had a reason to give them. Dozens gathered for a vigil in the first days, holding hands in prayer on a street that had been a crime scene that week. On Monday, July 27th, St. Patrick Church held a rosary at 5:30. The parish wrote that the community had been deeply affected, that they were praying for the repose of their souls, and that everyone was welcome. Tuesday belonged to the teenagers. Covenant Life Church opened its doors to middle and high school students, not for a service, just to give them a room. Some of them had sat next to those children in class. 3 of the 6 were the same age as each other, 11, which meant 3 separate grades of kids in that district woke up short a classmate. Kristen Perkowski, the superintendent, wrote to district families that week. She said support would be deployed for anyone who needed it, even with school out of session, and asked people to stop sharing what had not been confirmed. Nobody stopped. In the front yard on Riverside Trail, the memorial grew for most of a week. Flowers, stuffed animals, boards covered in handwritten notes, some from friends, some from Mandy's own students, most from people who never met any of them. When it rained that Monday, somebody went out and covered the whole thing with a tarp. Kelly Steigstra, a neighbor, said she felt sick, and that this should never happen to anybody. The family opened a fundraiser for Steve and Becky Lawwill. Whatever is left after the immediate costs goes into a scholarship carrying the children's names. It is the only mechanism anyone has found to make those 6 kids known for something other than the last morning of their lives. The pets died too, from the smoke. So we come back to the question this opened with. There is no answer to give you. Not from the sheriff, who conceded inside the first week that this may never be understood, not from detectives still working through paper, not from the family, who learned about the job from a news broadcast. What exists instead is a set of confirmed facts that refuse to resolve into a reason. A man with no record, an address with no history, a woman recognized in January for how she handled children who were having a hard day. 6 kids in their own bedrooms on a Friday morning in July, and 8 days before it, a mother in Hanfu, on the other side of the world, telling anyone who would look how proud she was of 2 girls she had brought home from it. The distance between those 2 things is the whole case. The only people who could close it are the same people who are gone. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and as always, please subscribe on YouTube. Thank you so much. See you next time.